Welcome to the Pet Loss Companion. I'm Ken Dolan-Del Vecchio. I'm here with my friend and co-author Nancy Saxton-Lopez, and this is a program that we do live on Facebook and YouTube every Thursday from 6 to about 6:30, give or take. And it is based in the work we did that resulted in the book called The Pet Loss Companion: Healing Advice from Family Therapists Who Lead Pet Loss Groups. But it is also a way for us to continue to have a discussion with people who may benefit from sharing their stories and hearing from others about the experience of loss of a pet and the healing that they're working through. You can reach us at as follows: kenddv@gmail.com is my email. Nancy's is nsaxtonlopez at csmpc.com. That's nsaxtonlopez at csmpc.com. The information that I'm running through right now is in our description. So if you don't take it down and you're interested in getting in touch, you can certainly find all of this in the description attached to the program, wherever you may find it. If you do write to us and you share a personal story, let us know if we can share it with our audience. And you can also tell us that you prefer we didn't share it, and one or both of us will write back to you in either case. And you can also tell us that we can share parts of it, but not all of it, and we will certainly respect what you tell us. We never share last names, and so it's more really all about the content and the story and how other people will find solace in the similarities. Also, you can write to us and tell us that you'd like us to speak on a certain topic or invite a certain guest who may be known to you. You can support our program in a number of ways. One way is by subscribing to our relatively new Substack program, where we share both the correspondence in writing that we receive from listeners, their photographs, and our responses. And sometimes there's a series of responses depending on what the communication was. And you can also support our program in a number of other ways through Venmo, PayPal, monthly subscription. All of this is in the description, as I mentioned. This program is a friend of Dakin Humane Society in Springfield, Massachusetts. They offer all sorts of programs that support humans and animals and the bond between us. And one of the programs that they offer is a cost-free pet loss support group that I facilitate over Zoom. It takes place on the second Tuesday of each month. It runs from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and there's a link to RSVP in the description. And if you are interested in coming to the meeting, please RSVP as soon as you know that, because we have to cap the registration because it is very, very well attended. The next one is Tuesday, February 13th. Also, please consider giving this program a like on YouTube or wherever else you may be listening to it, making a comment, and subscribing on YouTube. If you subscribe on YouTube, it helps the program to rise in visibility, which makes it more accessible to other people who are looking for this kind of support. And then the last thing before we get started is we'd like to let you know that we have an affiliate relationship with a great company called Bereave. And Bereave makes these beautifully crafted granite memorial plaques that you can use either outside in a grave marker or a garden marker, or you can use inside where you keep mementos of your beloved lost animal companion. And if you purchase one of these, you will also be giving a measure of support to our program. Nancy, you want to get us started? And there it is.
Bailey. I'm just showing Bailey. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful memorial. Okay, so we have two stories tonight, we hope, because they're both fairly long. Interesting. One is Josephine and Molly, and the other is Cat and Coy. Now, they both, I'm just realizing, only had their babies for about 3 years. 3 or 4 years. But the stories are, heartbreaking and heart-wrenching, but also they just show how the animal human bond is so important and how much we get from our babies. So, Ken, you're gonna share Josephine's story first.
I am. Okay, so and my cat Esme is here with me, and she's buggy. She's rubbing against
Oh, well,
laptop.
oh, well, I will say this, Boogie's at the door, so I hear him. I hear
If you
him
see her, or if
a
you
little
see
bit.
the
So
computer screen
we'll
moving,
see.
that's Esme rubbing against it. So here we go. Hi, Ken and Nancy. I've been listening to your podcast for a while now, and like so many others mentioned in their letters, emails to you, I like that you are so calm and understanding in the way you see people and see our grief. And at the same time, you're personal in sharing your own losses, and that you too have these feelings of sadness and pain. In other words, you are human. I hope so. I may also be informing you that English I will also start by informing you that English is not my first language. I am not apologizing for it since I can't do anything about it. It's just information so you understand. And some words may not be spelled correctly, or my sentences may be in the wrong order. My first language is Swedish. I vaguely recall that you are part Swedish, Ken, which is true. I'm a quarter Swedish. So maybe I can write in Swedish instead. And if she did that, I could not possibly understand a word of it. Also, as I wrote, I've been listening to almost all episodes, and even though not all of them are like our story, I found it helpful in my grieving process. I can take bits here and there from what you say and begin to think things over in comparison to what happened to our little dog and what I'm feeling. Feel free to share Molly's story the way you want, and I hope it will help someone else, like other stories have helped me. Molly's story. So here is a picture of Molly.
Oh,
She is the white and
white one.
orange
Mhm.
dog, and she is with her friend Walter, her life companion Walter.
Such a sweet girl.
We got Molly a Chihuahua mix when she was almost 2 months old on December 29th, 2020. I clearly remember that when I saw her, I thought, this must be a kitten, not a puppy. I picked her up and she was light as a feather. And I just knew I wanted to take care of her and protect her for the rest of our lives. She was the happiest little dog, and she had no problems at all coping with the long journey home. It took us about 6 or 7 hours by car from where we picked her up till we got home. Or the changes it must have meant for her to move out. Molly was later that day introduced to our son, who was 4.5 years old at the time, and they became friends right away and played for hours each day. After a while, we started to talk about getting Molly a friend of her own size to play with and a life partner. And when Molly was about 8 months old, we bought our second Chihuahua mix, Walter. We did wonder about how Molly would react to bringing a new puppy to her home, but the introduction went as smoothly as everything else. And within minutes, maybe seconds, they played with each other in our backyard. Life couldn't be better for them or for us. At first, Molly was the bigger of the two, but fairly soon we realized that Walter's Chihuahua genes were not the ones predominantly showing regarding size, and he soon became twice as big as Molly. This meant that Molly had to change her strategy from I am faster than you to I can jump from side to side quicker than you when they played. Well, she was also much more hot tempered than Walter. So sometimes she just looked at him and her eyes would say, "Oh, no, you don't," when he was coming. So much fun. We had a couple of wonderful years. We went for many long walks in the forest near our house or up in the mountains with both of our little dogs. The walk was the best thing, and both Molly and Walter would almost get overexcited anytime we said, "Should we go for a walk?" But in the beginning of April 2023, we began to notice that Molly had some stomach aches, especially when we touched the stomach and when she tried to find a comfortable way to sleep. The gut feeling told us that this is not normal, but we waited a couple of days to see if it was just temporary and hoped she would be back to normal. Then we saw slight changes in her, and she seemed low. So on the 13th of April, we brought her into the emergency room since no clinic had the time to see her that day or the following days. They examined her and came back with the results that all her abdomen was infected and that it was probably caused by her uterus, which now had to be removed now for her to survive. So, of course, we agreed on the surgery. And later that evening, the vet called to inform us that the surgery went well and she was doing fine. But the next day, they called again and told us that she was not doing well. And they wanted to keep her for observation one more day. She was critical but stable. On the 15th of April, we could finally pick her up. I was expecting my happy Molly to come toward me, but when I saw her, she looked tired. The vet said it can be like that after such a big surgery and the amount of medication she was on. So we just had to give her time to heal. But she never did gain any strength or energy. So we went back to the emergency room a couple of days later. They did a number of new tests, including trying to take blood from her legs. But she was a very small dog, as I mentioned, so they couldn't find a vein. 4 vet nurses pinned her down to get the needle in the vein before they finally concluded that they had to take the blood from her neck instead. To this day, I can hear Molly's screams from when they held her down. And needless to say that Molly had a fear of vets from that day and that experience. I cannot blame her, poor baby. The blood test showed that Molly still had an infection in her body, and in spite of removing her uterus, they did an ultrasound, which confirmed the infection and also showed that she had sludge and stones around and in her gallbladder. At the same time, they mentioned that they cannot be 100% sure if this is the only thing causing Molly to be as sick as she is. And the last call from the emergency room vet was when she said that maybe we should give up and let her go. And that was it. We hung up and I didn't know what to say or think. We continued to think about our options. We kept Molly on her medication and antibiotics, not ready to make a life or death decision now. All we really knew was that we had spent almost 50,000, and I guess that's Swedish currency, but it amounts to about $5,000 US of their own money on vet bills. So about 5,000 US. The money was not a real problem. Was not really a problem up to this point, but now we began to discuss and reflect on where will this end. After a couple of days, I found another clinic where some of the vets had special training towards illnesses in cats and dogs. So we made an appointment at their clinic, and when they examined her, they also found the sludge and the stones in and around her gallbladder. They even sent the x-ray to a specialist, which said that the amount of stones and sludge should not be a problem for now, and there's no hurry to remove the gallbladder. We had a discussion with the vet and asked if this will cure Molly, and she answered that she can't be sure 100%. Since Molly was so low in energy due to the ongoing infection in her body and the amount of pain she was in, we decided a couple of days later to remove the gallbladder anyway because we loved Molly and really believed that this would help her. On the 17th of May, she went in for a second major surgery in a little over a month. Hope to make her well and to have her with us for at least 10 more years. When we picked Molly up the next day, she was a much happier dog and more alive compared to that last time. And we really felt that we had done the right thing. She came back to us, and all we had to do now was to make sure she took it easy so she and her muscles had the time to heal. We went back a couple of times to the clinic for massage and laser treatments on her back. Since her muscles in her stomach were too weak, her back got sore. And she was getting better and better every day. And during the summer and the fall, she and Walter played together like nothing had ever happened. And we all enjoyed our time together again. Now, in hindsight, I can recall that Molly started to show some small signs of distress. Again, maybe from September or October. But at the time, we saw it as part of her back problem and that it didn't heal as it should and that we had just had to keep up the massage. She was eating, drinking, and still playing, so we really had no reason to believe she was ill again, and time went on. It was not until mid-December we realized something more was going on, and she started chewing and drooling, as in nausea, from time to time. She even began to moan more when she lay down and changed her position or moved around. The moaning was very, very similar to the last time, and the good feeling we've had about her recovery started to fade away and was replaced with a lot of worry and anxiety. We scheduled a new appointment at the clinic on December 13th, and from our description of her behavior, they too first thought it was just her back and maybe gastric problems. But they took some blood from her anyway to make sure, and when the test results came back, it showed that Molly's liver values were way above normal. We put her on medication in hope that it would lower her liver values, and then came back for an ultrasound on January 2nd to try to figure out what was going on with her this time. Between the 13th of December and the 2nd of January, Molly went back and forth between being okay and being in pain. Of course, when she had her good days or moments, we thought that she would make it this time also. But when she was in pain, it was heartbreaking, and we just wanted to make the pain go away. We still tried to give her the time of her life when she was able to and went for shorter walks which she loved, and we played with her, and we let her rest and gave her space when she needed to. We also began talking about our different options and outcomes. First and absolutely the most important things was that Molly did not suffer. As the days went on, the bad and painful times started to grow in length, but she was still there in her eyes and even played a couple of times a day, both with humans and with Walter. And she was still eating and drinking as she always did, which always made our decision even harder to make. If her illness will leave you to yet another big surgery, we cannot let Molly go through that again. Finally, the 2nd of January came, and we brought Molly to the clinic, and she was happy and barking at other dogs who had the nerve to come into her realm. This time, they gave her a sedative to take the blood from her and to perform the ultrasound. We had to go to the waiting room during this, but we saw another vet, one of the other specialists on cats and dogs at the clinic, and the vet nurses go into Molly's room. Of course, we became nervous with what that meant. When we were let back in, the vet showed us Molly's stomach on the screen and said that all her abdomen and belly looks fine, and her liver and all her other organs are okay. But there's one spot they found that they can't figure out what it is, some kind of lump right in the beginning of her intestines, along with fluid. Later on, the test results from the blood came back and showed that the liver values had gone down, still a little high, but on the better end of the scale. But Molly was still in pain, probably from this lump. The vet then said we had 3 options: do a CAT scan, and maybe they'll figure out what this is, and maybe they can remove it with surgery, or we can take her home and hope the pain will go away. This option still involves option number 1, but at a later time, or euthanasia. After the last option, my mind and memory got a little bit fuzzy, and it's like everything happens really fast, yet never so slowly, like people talking with and around me, but I can't hear them, or I don't remember anymore what they said exactly. Since we talked about it and made up our minds on this beforehand, it was pretty clear to us that we were going to take option number 3, especially now when the outcome was uncertain and the vet didn't know what the lump was or if Molly could ever be well again. But up at this point, we all had hoped for another outcome, especially since Molly was still eating, drinking, playing, and all those things that made her Molly when she was not in pain. And I feel we really didn't get the chance to understand and take in that we were about to end our dog's life. The vet went away for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, then came back and asked if we had made up our mind, and we said yes. She just brought us over to another room where the euthanasia would take place. As I wrote, we wish we could have had some more time with the decision, come to a mutual agreement if we should do it today or in 1, 2, or 3 days, and more time with Molly and not this running to another room. I had earlier decided that I could not be in the same room when it happened, and our son didn't want to either. So me and him went out for a short walk and then sat down in one of the other rooms at the clinic and talked about Molly. And I tried to explain what was going on to him, and I cried a lot. And the time went on, and after about 70 minutes, I wrote a message to my wife asking what was going on. She then wrote that they had not yet managed to get the needle in her leg and now given her 3 shots of sedative. At the moment I remember being uneasy with this, and I thought that they should know by now that they cannot insert a needle in her leg. So both me and my son went into the room where my wife and Molly was. Can still see her trying to lift her little head as we entered. And as clearly as I can remember not seeing her there, it was like her eyes were empty. And then a vet nurse came and back to try to get the needle in again. And when they did, Molly screamed. I had to hold my hands over my ears, and I cried. After a couple of minutes, maybe 1 or 2, the vet turned to us and said that they could not do it this way. So they're going to take Molly away to the operating room, give her anesthetic, and then insert the needle in her neck instead. You can imagine how many times I wanted to scream, "Stop," during this time and give Molly the CAT scan, but deep down I knew and still know that it was the right decision for her. But I do not feel she had the respectful and peaceful passing she deserved, since it took the vet 1.5 hours. And that raises the question of whether or not she suffered. Did she pick up on our sadness? We cried during this time, and did she become worried hearing us? I've Googled this, and as I understand, the animal does not notice anything around them if it's made the right way. Well, I'll never really know what Molly felt during her final hour. So I try not to think about it too much, even though the memories are still there, of course. It's been a couple of weeks since our little baby girl went over the Rainbow Bridge. It's really unfair that her body gave up on her. Even though it was the hardest time with a lot of ups and downs, I would not have done anything differently since her health and well-being was our number one priority. The only thing I wish I could change is her last hours alive, since this was not the way it was supposed to be. It breaks my heart. We miss her and all the joy she gave us during the 3 years we had her in our life. She will always be a big part of our lives. I'm not religious and I'm not sure what happens to our souls or energy, but I know that as long as I remember her, she will still be alive. And in those memories, she is free and does not have any pain anymore. She's happy. Thank you, Molly, for choosing us as your pet parents and letting us be part of your life. We love you, sweet Molly, and we will carry your legacy with us for the rest of our time. I've enclosed 2 pictures of Molly. One where she was sunbathing with Walter, and then my last picture of her on the 1st of January. Thank you for your time and thank you for your podcast. I wish I could raise the other picture, but somehow it's not coming up. It's a really beautiful picture, and it'll be on the stack.
Mm-hmm. Now, going through that time of euthanasia.
Oh, it's horrible.
That is so excruciatingly difficult, right? Because the wish was, of course, that she would go peacefully.
Yes.
And there was so much difficulty in finding the veins. We've had these stories before. And then to go in and see her still looking at Josephine, right? And then having to go through more of the scream. I mean, it's horrible. No matter how you look at it, or no matter how you experience it, it's a very difficult decision. But we talked a lot about euthanasia. We've talked about when our baby are so ill, and it's the disease that's killing them, and they're suffering. Then it is, and it can be a gift. However, when this ending happens, this kind of ending happens, and sometimes it does, it is so gut-wrenching. It's so sad.
It's so hard. And I have to say, it's very reminiscent of the way my Abigail died.
Yeah, right.
Because it was very similar to what they were experiencing with Molly, and that the vet kept trying to get a vein. And she was a little chihuahua. She weighed about 5.5 pounds. And they tried about 3 times, and it was clear to me that she was dying. It was clear to me and my husband that she was dying on her own. And so I just said, stop.
Yeah.
And she passed. They were saying they were going to put the needle in her heart. And
yeah, I know.
I said, no, you're not doing that, because I could see that she was leaving us really quickly anyway. And I didn't want her last moments to be all of these pokes, which were not being effective.
Or for you also to witness that. I mean, it's just heartbreaking.
But I also think that Molly was so sedated.
Yes, I agree.
And Abigail was so far
out
into her
transition
that it doesn't matter to them. It only matters to us. We're
Right.
seeing this, and we're really upset by it. And they are already onto their next adventure, is the way I think about it.
That's right, because
they're already in transition.
Exactly. Animals don't look at death like we do, right?
Yeah.
So they're not looking to know in their head, well, I'm going to die now. I mean, it's a process, it's a bodily process that they go through. And yes, it's a possibility there was a little indication of watching their loved ones, their human loved ones, being upset. But at that point, Molly was already really sedated.
She was very sedated, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And, Josephine and her wife and their son, I mean, they loved her so much, and they really did think about it a lot. They really did think that
they
go through all the options, right? And with the vet and what was going to happen. But the problem is sometimes these other things come up, and then you feel like you're on this roller coaster, right?
Oh, and the more I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Having her go through more surgery.
Exactly.
I mean, I would have been right with them in making the decision. And they, Josephine talks in the letter about going back and forth because she's grieving while she's writing the letter, but she also comes back to, I know it was the right thing. And it sounds very much like the right thing to do.
Yes,
and
exactly.
There's nothing more we can do. There's nothing more we can
I
do.
think that that was a beautiful letter around how they loved this little dog and taking care of her. She got sick very young.
Yes.
She had multiple issues that was going on for
Yep.
this little girl. So I'll go and start with Kat. My name is Kat.
Just one. Let's just have this one
There
comment.
is something. Okay,
You,
okay.
you just have one comment that says "sweet babies"
Sweet baby. Yes, Francis.
from
Thank
Francis.
you. Of course, they're sweet babies. My name is Kat. I'm 25 years old, and I found your podcast a little over a month ago after the passing of my 3-year-old, Kat and best friend Coy, also better known as Stinky, due to him being the stinkiest cat and best friend Coy. Um, and he being the stinkiest kitten I'd ever met in my life. I found Coy at such a pivotal point in my life. I had been through a lot of physical and emotional trauma during my teen years, and because of that, I have chronic health issues for the last 8 years. About 3 years ago, around the time I got Coy, I had suddenly also found the motivation to radically fight for my health again after being disregarded by the healthcare system. There was something very healing about being loved through that period of being so sick each day and getting to take care of someone and something else, even when I struggled to take care of myself. I also got Coy not long after having a miscarriage with my current partner, who I live with. Weirdly enough, not long after getting Coy, I had a tarot reading done from a friend of mine who said that Coy was sent to me to help me heal from the loss of my pregnancy. With that being said, as he grew up, he strangely seemed to take on a lot of my traits. He was quirky, he was goofy, and he was anxious. He was my son in a lot of ways. Sneaky was known to be scared of just about everything. He was just a little guy afraid of most things in the big world, like me. Haha. He was a very vocal cat, and his meow became an important hello, good night, and I love you to me over the next 3 years. The 3 years we spent together are almost indescribable, but I know I have never loved a pet like I loved him, and I have never felt such a connection, and in turn, such a sense of grief after loss. I've lost many people in my life and many family pets, but he was my first pet that was my own and that I lived with as an adult. A little over a month ago, Coy's life had abruptly come to an end. It still feels like yesterday in my heart. On the evening of November 22nd, after returning home from work and going straight to feed our 2 boys, Cedric, who is 6, and Coy. Coy didn't want to eat that night, but it wasn't uncommon for him to demand my love upon getting home before he agreed to eat or do anything else, so I didn't think much of it. I went about the rest of my night, and even though I thought it was a little odd he wasn't walking around much that night, I still didn't notice anything alarming yet. But the next morning when I woke up and noticed only Cedric was in bed with me, that's when I started to worry. My partner was out of town for work at the time, and whenever he is out of town, both of the boys always sleep with me. I frantically searched the house only to have Coy come out from hiding in a closet a few minutes later, making the most gut-wrenching and heartbreaking noise. I knew something was wrong instantly. I knew my baby was in pain. I called my mom and the vet immediately and soon after packed up my stuff and took him in. Not long after arriving and being examined, they found a single piece of thread wrapped around his tongue and stuck down his throat. They attempted to cut out all they could, but given some of it was stuck very far down, they could only cut about 6 inches out. They did x-rays just to make sure his intestines looked okay, and they said they looked fine at the time. They were hopeful that now that they cut the string out from his airway, that within a day or 2 he would begin eating and pass the rest of the thread. They said his tongue and throat could be irritated and not to worry if he didn't immediately run to eat upon getting home. I took him home that night to my apartment and could feel his fear. He hid all night under the couch in the living room, and I made a bed on the living room floor to sleep near him to offer any feelings of safety that I could. Cedric slept near him too that night. The next day was Thanksgiving, and I didn't really feel comfortable leaving him alone for the day, so I packed my bags for the night and took Stinky with me to my parents for the day, so neither him or I had to be alone. After him not eating by Thanksgiving night, that's almost when the grief began. I could feel that something was wrong with him still, that he wasn't feeling good, and the vet said if he hadn't eaten by that night, that would be the time to start getting concerned. I had to wait for the vet to open back up Friday to take him in since it was a holiday, and I was hoping if I just got him fluids and some anti-nausea meds, and maybe even something to help him relax, that maybe would be the key to getting him to eating again. Maybe if he felt safe, he would eat. Friday, they gave him fluids, nausea meds, and took x-rays again to make sure his intestines still looked okay. They said any meds that would make him relax would slow down his digestion, though, and that wasn't what we wanted, given we were trying to help him pass the thread. They sent me home with more nausea meds and special soft foods to syringe feed him if he didn't start eating by himself. They said if it worsened at all, to bring him back in. The next few days, Friday afternoon, Sunday, were so painful and heartbreaking. He continued to hide and not act himself. He continued to cry in pain and discomfort, and we had to syringe feed him multiple times a day, and he hated it. He didn't seem to be getting worse, but he definitely wasn't getting better. Even though he was sleeping with me at night, I knew my baby was not okay and that I had to start preparing for other outcomes. On Sunday night, after we increased the syringe food amount per vet's instruction, he threw up a lot. It was so awful. You could tell it was at least a day's worth of food, and he seemed to be even more exhausted and uncomfortable after. My family agreed to take him into the vet in the morning, given that the only vet was the expensive emergency center a few cities over, and I exhausted most of my funds at the first 2 vet appointments that week already. Monday morning, I woke up tired after now having barely slept in 5 nights, and upon seeing my Stinky, my heart was breaking. He looked like he was suffering so much. After getting to the vet and having him examined and x-rayed again, they said his intestines felt tightened and that the x-ray showed a shadow in a portion of them, and they had concern that some of his intestines were starting to die from the stress of it all and not eating. They said given how he responded to all the other treatments, they didn't feel confident that they could save him through exploratory surgery, and that they also didn't feel confident he even had enough energy to make it through such a procedure. As kindly and as softly as they could, they suggested euthanasia. I still am in shock just as much as I was that day that I was losing my 3-year-old cat over a single piece of thread. I couldn't wrap my head or my heart around it. I left the vet that day a different person, hurting in a way that I had never heard before. It was astounding to me that no pain in the last 8 years of terrible health and bodily pains, that nothing equated to the feeling of having to say goodbye to him. Also worth mentioning that I lost Stinky right after the anniversary of my miscarriage, and that my birthday was a few days after his death. Both of those things were so hard to process, especially it being an anniversary of my miscarriage and losing him. Stinky died on a Monday, and my birthday was the Friday coming up after that. Luckily, my partner came home from being out of town that day, but I still spent all week crying, barely eating, barely sleeping, but somehow keeping my heart radically open. If there was any immediate lessons to be taken away from his death, I knew for sure he would want me to remain open to my emotional experience, love, and life in general. He wouldn't have wanted me to shut down like I used to before we found each other. So I planned to go to a Humane Society location an hour away on my birthday that people I knew had good things to say about. I decided the way I wanted to heal was through connection and love. But last minute, after posting online finally about the loss of my cat to sort of let my friends and clients know before my birthday came around, I received a message from a random friend of a friend. He had 2 barn kittens he was looking for a home for. He said that one of them was extremely vocal and a real spitfire, 2 things I found myself longing for, the energy of an animal and the sound of a cat's meow. It all felt kind of fated. I picked up little Tony on my birthday, and I have had him for about a month now. Another beautiful boy. Beyond taking literal naps directly on top of Coy's ashes, he has seemed to take on a lot of the traits and daily exchanges that Coy and I used to have. He's been a source of joy in life that is so unique and special. I still cry almost every day, if not multiple times a day. There have been days where I've been so tired of feeling and missing him and want to turn it all off and turn away from myself and the world. I go through all the circles of blaming myself from time to time, rethinking the 5 days before his death, wondering if I did everything right, wondering if there was a way I could have made him feel safe enough to eat. But as much as it hurts, the hurt also feels like a trophy to prove just how hard I loved and opened myself over the last 3 years with him. And finding your podcast felt like another sign or confirmation that keeping my heart open was what was best for me. To hear others share their grief, to hear you guys repeatedly provide a safe space and kind words is healing in itself. Coy's death ultimately felt like a very brash way of understanding how our nervous system affects our ability to heal. how our fear can keep us from healing and from living, for that matter. That is a message I've needed to absorb for a long time, and I hope that sharing the story and all the feelings attached to it can help someone somewhere. Thank you again for providing such a wonderful, safe place for others. Your podcast makes me cry, all different kinds of tears, smile, laugh, and feel connected to the collective. This is a beautiful corner where communities of all kinds can meet within one tragic commonality, grief and loss. Thank you for all the time and energy you put forth helping others heal and process their pain. What wisdom from a 25-year-old?
Yeah, really. It's really powerful. And her story, or their story, I should say, once again, for me, was like, wow, that you just never know, like really simple things that an animal gets into can become
Right.
lethal.
That's right.
And I mean, you do the best you can to keep them safe, and then they eat a piece of thread that they
Yeah.
find or a piece of string. And I always think about the kinds of things that I've pulled out of my dog's mouths, and also that I've seen come out of their butts, like string, and it's like it's amazing. It's just the luck of the draw sometimes, I
I
guess.
know.
That something very simple can become lethal. And it's just so very sad
Yes.
to hear this story, and to but it's also it's just so powerful to hear again this young person
This who
talk
the
about
wisdom of
the way that they processed this,
grieving and
and
the relationship she had.
the relationship, and
Right?
then the way that the grief, she said something that was really, really reminiscent of some of my own experiences. She said that she was like radically open. Her
Yeah.
heart was radically open, and that happens to many of us when we allow ourselves to feel the fullness of our grief. And they are somebody who really is right there emotionally. I mean, they're
Yes.
very open, and
And that was really important. And I think for all they went through and through their life, then they found this little baby, this koi, and the gift that they both gave each other.
and then they found Tony.
Yeah.
Here's
Mhm.
Tony, who is indeed a beautiful little kitten. And you can see that Kat sees Tony as the legacy
Mhm.
for Coy, who she lost,
That's
who
right.
they lost.
Who they lost.
And so I also, before we close, first of all, we want to thank Kat and Joe
Yes.
so much for their stories.
This
I was able to bring up a picture of
Oh,
Molly,
there's
and
Molly.
here's Molly, who,
Sweet.
by the way, is a spitting image of my little Lily, who I had many years ago. Lily was tiny. She was 2.5 years old. She only lived to be 5.5, but boy, the resemblance, I mean, this could be her. So we wanted to just make sure that since Josephine sent us this, that we shared the picture as well. So we want to remind you, please subscribe on YouTube if you find the program helpful. That's always helpful to other people who may be looking for this kind of support. And we want to thank
Cat
Josephine and
and
Kat
Josephine.
again for sharing with
Yes.
us.
Thank you. Take care.